In a flash of searing plasma, the Elysian hovercraft exploded, and General Karos tumbled through the air like a rag doll, crashing to the blood-soaked dirt of Helios 5. The ruthless general lay broken and bleeding, abandoned by his own troops. At just 25 Elysian years old, Karos was a prodigy of war, rising through the ranks on cunning and brutality. But now he was alone, betrayed, left to die by the very soldiers he led in a merciless assault on this human mining colony. Commander Roger Porter approached the burning wreckage cautiously, rifle at the ready, his recon squad fanned out behind him, watching for any sign of an Elysian ambush. Porter knew that Karos, butcher of unarmed civilians, would receive no mercy from human hands. By all rights, they should put a bullet in the alien's brain and leave his corpse for the scavengers. But something stayed Porter's hand, an unshakable sense that this was a pivotal moment upon which the future balanced. "Get the med kit," Porter ordered, his eyes never leaving Karos's mangled form. "Stabilize him and prep for evac back to base." His squad protested vehemently. This was suicide. The Elysians would tear the base apart to recover their general. Porter silenced them with a sharp glare. Humanity was better than this, stronger than the barbarism they fought against. Saving Karos could turn the tide, yield vital intel on Elysian tactics and weapons. More than that, it could light a spark of doubt in the young general's mind, sow the seeds of an alliance that could save countless lives on both sides. As human medics fought to keep Karos alive, the entire base readied for war. The Elysians would come, that much was certain. Soldiers whispered mutinously in shadowed corridors, their hatred for Karos outweighing any hope of strategic advantage. Porter knew his command hung by a thread, but he would not yield. Not now, when the fate of Helios 5 and the future of humanity lay in the balance. The road ahead promised only pain and sacrifice, but if Karos could be turned, if this act of compassion could forge an unlikely partnership between bitter foes, then perhaps there was still hope for humans and Elysians alike. In the base's cramped medical bay, Lieutenant Sarah Chen hovered over the comatose form of General Karos, adjusting IV lines and monitoring the alien's vital signs. The Elysian's gray skin was mottled with bruises, his thin frame swathed in bandages. Chen couldn't help but marvel at the otherworldly elegance of his facial features, so different from her own. She glanced up as Commander Porter entered the room, his weathered face etched with fatigue. "Any change?" he asked, coming to stand beside her. Chen shook her head. "His condition is stable, but he shows no signs of regaining consciousness." She hesitated, then added, "I've been studying his anatomy, trying to understand how his body works. The Elysians are so different from us, but in some ways, they're remarkably similar." Porter nodded, his gaze fixed on Karos's still form. "We need him, Chen, not just for the information he might provide, but for the chance to end this war without more bloodshed." Outside the medical bay, the base hummed with tension. Soldiers patrolled the perimeter, eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of an Elysian attack. In the armory, Captain Reeves oversaw the distribution of weapons and ammunition, his face grim. Corporal Hansen paced the halls, his anger simmering just beneath the surface. He couldn't understand why Porter insisted on protecting the enemy general. Karos was a monster, responsible for the deaths of countless human civilians. He deserved to die, not be coddled in the medical bay. As the days dragged on, Chen spent every spare moment at Karos's bedside, studying his physiology and monitoring his condition. She talked to him, telling stories of Earth's oceans and mountains, of the great cities that had risen from the ashes of war. She hoped that somehow her words might reach him through the veil of unconsciousness. One night, as Chen dozed in a chair beside Karos's bed, Hansen slipped into the medical bay, a knife clutched in his hand. He moved silently to the Elysian's bedside, his face twisted with hatred. Just as he raised the knife to strike, Chen awoke with a start. She leapt to her feet, putting herself between Hansen and Karos. "Stop!" she cried, her voice ringing through the quiet room. "You can't do this!" Hansen sneered at her, his eyes cold. "Get out of my way, Chen. This bastard deserves to die." Chen stood her ground, her heart pounding. She searched for the right words, the words that might make Hansen see reason. If we kill him, we're no better than the Elysians, she said softly. We have to be better than that. We have to show them that there's another way. For a long moment, Hansen wavered, the knife trembling in his grip. Then, with a muttered curse, he lowered his arm and stalked out of the room. Chen sagged against the bed, relief washing over her. She looked down at Karos, at the slow rise and fall of his chest. I won't let them hurt you, she whispered, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. I promise. In the command center, Porter studied the latest intelligence reports, his brow furrowed. The Elysians were massing their forces, preparing for a final assault on the base. Time was running out. He thought of Karos lying unconscious in the medical bay. If they could just reach him, make him see the truth about his people, maybe they could find a way to end this war without more death. It was a desperate hope, but it was all they had. Porter turned to Reeves, his eyes hard. Double the patrols. Reinforce the perimeter. We have to be ready for anything. As the base braced for the coming storm, Chen kept her vigil at Karos's bedside, praying for a miracle. And deep in the recesses of the Elysian's mind, a flicker of consciousness stirred, drawn towards the light of her voice. Days stretched into weeks as Chen maintained her vigil over Karos's still form. The Elysian general's vital signs remained stable, but he showed no signs of waking. Chen's eyes grew heavy as she checked his monitors for the 1,000th time. A soft groan broke the silence. Chen's head snapped up, fatigue forgotten. Karos's eyes flickered open, unfocused and confused. Where am I? His voice was hoarse from disuse. Chen leaned forward, her heart racing. You're safe in our medical bay. How do you feel? Karos's eyes darted around the room, panic rising in his voice. Humans? Why am I here? What have you done to me? Chen raised her hands in a placating gesture. We saved you. Your hovercraft was destroyed, and you were badly injured. We've been treating you for weeks. Karos struggled to sit up, wincing in pain. Why? I'm your enemy. You should have left me to die. That's not our way, Chen said softly. She gently pushed him back onto the bed. Please, try to stay still. You're still healing. Karos glared at her, but exhaustion won out. He sank back onto the pillow, his breathing labored. Over the next few days, Chen spent every waking moment with Karos, answering his questions and tending to his needs. At first, he was hostile and distrustful, but gradually his demeanor began to soften. One evening, as Chen changed his bandages, Karos asked, Tell me about your world, Earth. What's it like? Chen's eyes lit up. It's beautiful. We have vast oceans, towering mountains, and forests that stretch as far as the eye can see. Our cities are marvels of technology and art. As she spoke, Karos found himself captivated by the passion in her voice. He had never heard anyone speak of their homeworld with such reverence. Commander Porter's visits were less frequent, but no less impactful. During one such visit, Karos couldn't contain his curiosity any longer. Why did you save me? He asked Porter. After everything I've done to your people? Porter's gaze was steady. Because we believe in the inherent worth of all sentient life. We fight to protect our freedom and our way of life, not out of hatred for your kind. Karos frowned. But the Elysian Empire brings order and prosperity to the galaxy. We uplift primitive species, show them a better way of life. Is that what they told you? Porter's voice was gentle. The Empire subjugates and exploits. Those who resist are crushed. We've seen entire worlds stripped of resources, their populations enslaved or worse. Karos opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. Doubt gnawed at him. Could everything he'd been taught be a lie? As the days passed, Karos found himself looking forward to Chen's visits. Her kindness and genuine interest in his culture fascinated him. He began to see humans not as inferior beings to be conquered, but as a species with their own rich history and vibrant culture. The calm was shattered by the sound of distant explosions. Alarms blared throughout the base. Porter burst into the medical bay, his face grim. The Elysians are here. High General Theros is leading the assault. We're under heavy bombardment. Karos's blood ran cold. Theros, his mentor and father figure, had come for him. But at what cost? Porter turned to Karos, his eyes intense. We need your help. Your knowledge of Elysian tactics might be our only chance to escape. Karos hesitated, torn between his loyalty to the Empire and his growing respect for the humans. Chen placed a hand on his arm, her touch gentle but insistent. Please, she said softly, help us survive this. In that moment, Karos made his choice. He nodded, his voice steady. What do you need to know? As the base shook around them, Karos worked feverishly with Chen and Porter, poring over star charts and tactical displays. He revealed the patterns in Elysian patrol routes, the blind spots in their sensor grids. There, Karos said, pointing to a small moon. If we can reach it, the mineral deposits should mask our energy signatures. Porter nodded grimly. It's our best shot. I'm ordering a full evacuation. We leave in 30 minutes. The next half hour was chaos. Soldiers and civilians streamed towards the waiting transports, carrying what little they could. Chen helped Karos to his feet, supporting him as they made their way through the crumbling corridors. They reached the last transport just as another explosion rocked the base. Karos stumbled, but Chen held him steady. As they strapped in, Karos caught a glimpse of the devastation outside. The only home he had known for months was being reduced to rubble. The transport lurched into the air, dodging debris and enemy fire. Karos felt Chen's hand slip into his, squeezing gently. He returned the pressure, his pupils dilating from the enormity of what he had done. As they broke atmosphere, Karos stared out the viewport at the stars beyond. For the first time in his life, he had no idea what the future held. But as he looked at Chen's determined face, he knew he had made the right choice. The transport banked sharply, heading for the distant moon and an uncertain future. Behind them, the Elysian fleet loomed, a dark promise of the challenges that lay ahead. The transport shuddered as it exited Helios Phi's atmosphere, joining a ragtag fleet of human ships fleeing the devastation below. Karos clutched the armrests of his seat, his eyes fixed on the monitor as his former home dwindled to a distant speck. Plot a course for Amalthea, Commander Porter ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. Karos, we need those Elysian defensive protocols now. Karos nodded, pushing aside his conflicted emotions. He limped to the navigation console, Chen supporting him as he moved. His fingers flew across the holographic interface, inputting a series of complex codes. There, he said, pointing to a small moon orbiting a gas giant. Amalthea's mineral composition should mask our energy signatures, but we'll need to thread the needle between these two patrol routes. Porter studied the display, then nodded grimly. It's our best shot. All ships follow these coordinates precisely. As the fleet maneuvered through the treacherous path Karos had laid out, Chen kept a watchful eye on the Elysian's vital signs. How are you holding up? She asked softly. Karos managed a weak smile. I've been better, but I'm alive thanks to you. The journey to Amalthea was tense, every moment fraught with the possibility of detection. When they finally touched down on the moon's craggy surface, a collective sigh of relief rippled through the survivors. The next few days were a blur of activity as the humans established a makeshift base. Karos found himself working alongside Chen and Porter, poring over star charts and tactical displays. As they dissected Elysian battle strategies, Karos couldn't help but admire the humans' resourcefulness. Your people are remarkable, he said to Chen one evening as they took a rare moment of rest. I was taught that humans were primitive, but your adaptability is impressive. Chen smiled, her eyes tired but warm. We've had to be. It's how we've survived this long. Their respite was short-lived. Alarms blared throughout the base, signaling the approach of an Elysian battle fleet. Karos's blood ran cold as he recognized the configuration. It's High General Theros, he said, his voice tight. He's found us. The battle that followed was brutal and swift. Human fighters darted between massive Elysian warships, buying time as transports ferried civilians to the relative safety of Amalthea's underground caverns. Karos watched from the command center, his heart pounding as he witnessed acts of heroism he never thought possible from humans. Pilots sacrificed themselves to shield evacuating transports. Ground troops held the line against overwhelming odds, allowing their comrades to retreat. In the chaos of the fight, Karos found himself with a clear path to an undamaged shuttle. For a moment he hesitated. He could return to the Elysian fleet, to the life he had known. But as he looked back at Chen and Porter, coordinating the desperate defense, he knew he couldn't abandon them. Karos made his choice. He sprinted not towards escape, but towards the thick of the battle. "Commander!" he shouted over the din of explosions. "I know how to disable Theros' flagship." Porter's eyes widened, then narrowed with tenacity. "What do you need?" "A small strike team. We can exploit a weakness in their shield generator. If we take it out, your forces might have a chance." Minutes later, Karos found himself leading a group of human soldiers through the wreckage of the battlefield. They moved with a precision that surprised him, following his instructions without hesitation. As they approached the looming bulk of Theros' ship, Karos felt a surge of something unfamiliar. It wasn't until later that he recognized it as hope. The strike team fought their way through the ship's defenses, Karos' insider knowledge proving invaluable. When they reached the shield generator, Karos didn't hesitate. He input the override codes himself, watching with grim satisfaction as the massive ship's defenses flickered and died. The tide of battle turned swiftly after that. Without their flagship's protection, the Elysian fleet found itself outmaneuvered by the smaller, more agile human ships. As Theros' forces retreated, a ragged cheer went up from the survivors on Amalthea. In the aftermath, Karos stood with Chen and Porter, watching the last of the Elysian ships disappear into hyperspace. He felt lighter somehow, as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. "There's something you should know," he said, turning to face them. "There are others like me in the Empire, a secret faction who question our leader's methods. If we could make contact with them—" Porter's eyes gleamed with the first real hope Karos had seen since their escape from Helios 5. "That could change everything. Karos, do you think you could reach out to these rebels?" Karos nodded, feeling a sense of purpose he had never known before. "I can try. It won't be easy, but if there's a chance to end this war—" As the battered human fleet prepared to leave Amalthea, searching for their next refuge among the stars, Karos found himself standing shoulder to shoulder with those he once called enemy. Chen squeezed his hand, a silent gesture of support and trust. Karos looked out at the vast expanse of space before them, no longer seeing it as a realm to be conquered, but as a frontier of possibility. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew he had found his place among these resilient, determined humans. The ships lifted off, carrying with them the hopes of two species and the seeds of an alliance that could reshape the galaxy. The human fleet drifted through the inky void of space, a ragtag assembly of ships bearing the scars of recent battles. On the bridge of the lead vessel, Karos stood beside Commander Porter, studying a holographic star chart. "Altair Prime," Karos said, pointing to a small, unremarkable dot. "It's a desert world, barely a blip on the Empire's radar. We should be able to regroup there without detection." Porter nodded, his face etched with weariness. "Set a course," he ordered the navigator, "and pray we don't have any more surprises." As the fleet limped towards their destination, Karos spent hours hunched over comm terminals, sending carefully coded messages into the ether. On the third day of their journey, a response came. "I've made contact," Karos announced, his eyes bright with excitement. "Her name is Verena. She leads a growing faction of Elysian rebels." Chen, who had been monitoring Karos' vital signs, looked up sharply. "Can we trust her?" Karos met her gaze. "We have to try." Altair Prime loomed before them, a sphere of burnt orange and deep red. As the ships touched down on the planet's dusty surface, Karos felt a mix of anticipation and dread. The meeting with Verena took place in an abandoned mining outpost. She was tall and lithe, with piercing green eyes that seemed to look right through Karos. As Porter laid out the human situation, Verena listened impassively. "Why should we risk our necks for you?" she asked when Porter finished. Karos stepped forward. "Because I've seen what these humans are capable of," he said, his voice low and intense. "They showed me compassion when they had every reason not to. They fight not for conquest, but for freedom, for all sentient life." Verina's eyes narrowed, but Karos saw a flicker of something in their depths. Hope, perhaps, or recognition. Very well, she said at last. We'll provide you with supplies and intelligence. In return, you'll help us undermine Theros's forces from within. As they shook hands, sealing their tentative alliance, a high-pitched whine split the air. Karos's blood ran cold as he recognized the sound of an Elysian stealth fighter. "Incoming!" Porter shouted, but it was too late. The wall exploded inward, showering them with debris. Through the smoke strode a figure Karos recognized with horror, Croxus, one of Theros's elite assassins. "Traitor!" Croxus snarled, his eyes fixed on Karos. What followed was chaos. Croxus moved with inhuman speed, cutting down rebels and humans alike. Karos and Chen found themselves cornered, backs against a crumbling wall. "My orders are to eliminate you and any who would aid these vermin," Croxus said, raising his weapon. A burst of plasma fire erupted from behind the assassin. Verina's rebels had regrouped, launching a desperate counterattack. In the confusion, Chen grabbed Karos's arm and pulled him towards an exit. They ran through twisting corridors, the sounds of battle echoing behind them. As they rounded a corner, Karos saw Verina engaged in hand-to-hand combat with Croxus. Even as he watched, the assassin's blade found its mark. Verina fell, clutching her side. Karos moved to help her, but Chen held him back. "We have to go!" she shouted. Torn, Karos met Verina's eyes. She nodded once, her meaning clear. Go, live, fight on. As they fled the outpost, Karos's mind raced. Verina's sacrifice, Croxus's brutality, the fragile alliance now stained with blood. It all crystallized into a burning grit. Back aboard the human flagship, Karos pored over star charts and tactical readouts. He barely noticed when Chen brought him a meal or when Porter came to check on his progress. "Here," Karos said finally, pointing to a cluster of systems. "Theros's main fleet will be resupplying at this shipyard. If we strike now, while they're vulnerable—" Porter studied the display, his expression grim. "It's risky," he said, "but it might be our only shot." The attack on the shipyard was unlike anything Karos had ever experienced. Human fighters darted between massive Elysian cruisers, their nimble maneuvers guided by Karos's insider knowledge. Explosions bloomed in the void as capital ships fell to precision strikes. Karos found himself in the thick of the action, coordinating rebel Elysian forces from a commandeered shuttle. As he called out attack vectors, he caught sight of Chen's fighter, executing a daring run against a dreadnought's engines. Then, in a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, Karos watched helplessly as Chen's ship was caught in a tractor beam. He saw her eject, saw the Elysian boarding parties converging on her position. "No!" Karos shouted, but it was too late. Chen vanished into the bowels of an enemy ship. As the battle raged around him, Karos felt something shift deep within his core. The woman who had shown him kindness, who had opened his eyes to a new way of thinking, was now in the hands of those who would show no mercy. Karos gripped the shuttle's controls, his eyes sharp in unwavering perseverance. Whatever it took, however long it might be, he would find Chen. He would save her. The shipyard burned behind him as Karos set a new course, the first step on a journey that would change the fate of two civilizations. Karos stood before the assembled team, his eyes burning with fierce persistence. "We're going after Chen," he announced, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. Commander Porter nodded grimly. "I've handpicked our best for this mission. We go in fast, we go in quiet, and we bring her home." The prison complex loomed before them, a monolithic structure of cold steel and pulsing energy fields. Karos led the strike team through a maintenance conduit, his fingers dancing across a stolen access panel. "Security protocols haven't changed," he muttered, a mix of relief and disgust in his voice. "Arrogance will be their downfall." They moved like shadows through the facility, disabling alarms and neutralizing guards with ruthless efficiency. Karos's insider knowledge proved invaluable, guiding them past automated defenses and through secret passages. As they neared the high-security wing, the distinctive whine of Elysian plasma rifles filled the air. Elite guards poured into the corridor, their armor gleaming under harsh lights. "Take cover!" Karos shouted, diving behind a bulkhead. The air crackled with energy bolts as human and Elysian rebels returned fire. Karos caught glimpses of his companions, a human soldier laying down suppressing fire, a rebel Elysian hacking into a nearby terminal to seal blast doors. They fought their way forward, inch by bloody inch. Karos's heart pounded as they reached Chen's cell. He input the override code with trembling fingers, praying it hadn't been changed. The door hissed open. Chen lay on a bare cot, her face bruised but her eyes clear and defiant. "Took you long enough," she said, managing a weak smile. Karos helped her to her feet, relief washing over him. "Let's get you out of here." They turned to leave, only to find their path blocked by a familiar figure. Croxus stood in the doorway, his assassin's blade glinting in the harsh light. "You never could leave well enough alone, could you, Karos?" Croxus sneered. Karos pushed Chen behind him, facing his former comrade. "This ends now, Croxus." What followed was a blur of motion. Karos and Croxus clashed in a deadly dance, their movements a testament to years of shared training. Karos ducked under a vicious swipe, countering with a strike to Croxus's midsection. As they grappled, Karos saw an opening. He twisted, preparing to deliver a killing blow, only to feel a hand on his arm. "Wait!" Chen's voice cut through the haze of battle. She turned to Croxus, her eyes intense. "You know this is wrong. The Empire, Theros, they're leading us down a path of destruction. There's another way." Croxus hesitated, his blade wavering. In that moment of uncertainty, Karos made his move. He grabbed Chen's arm and bolted past the stunned assassin, rejoining the rest of the strike team. They fled through the chaos of the prison, alarms blaring and guards in disarray. As they reached their extraction point, Karos glanced back, half expecting to see Croxus in pursuit, but the corridor behind them remained empty. Back aboard the human flagship, as medics tended to Chen's injuries, Karos pored over intelligence reports. His mind raced with possibilities, strategies, forming and reforming. "Commander," he said, turning to Porter, "I have a plan. It's risky, but it might be our best shot at crippling Theros' war machine." Porter listened intently as Karos outlined his strategy. When he finished, the commander's eyes gleamed with a mix of admiration and trepidation. "You're talking about hitting multiple targets simultaneously," Porter said. "It's ambitious, I'll give you that." Karos nodded. "We'll need every fighter, every ship we can muster. But if we succeed, we can buy ourselves the time we need to turn this war around." The next days were a whirlwind of preparation. Karos worked tirelessly, coordinating with human tacticians and rebel informants. Chen, still recovering but refusing to be sidelined, assisted in planning the strikes. As the combined human-rebel fleet prepared to launch, Karos stood on the bridge, watching ships move into formation. The weight of what they were about to attempt settled on his shoulders. "All units, report in," Porter's voice crackled over the comm. As each strike team confirmed their readiness, Karos felt a surge of pride. These were beings he once considered enemies, now united in a common cause. "This is it," Chen said softly beside him. "No turning back now." Karos nodded, his eyes fixed on the stars ahead. "For Verena," he murmured. "For all of us." The fleet jumped to hyperspace, hurtling towards their targets. As they emerged near the first Elysian shipyard, Karos saw the element of surprise play out in real time. Elysian ships scrambled to respond, caught completely off guard. Human fighters darted between massive Elysian cruisers, their nimble maneuvers guided by Karos's insider knowledge. Explosions bloomed in the void as vital infrastructure crumbled under precision strikes. Similar scenes played out across multiple systems. Karos coordinated the attacks from the flagship, his voice steady as he relayed orders and intel. Hours blurred together in a haze of tactical displays and damage reports. When it was over, when the last strike team reported success, a ragged cheer went up throughout the fleet. They had done it. Theros' supply lines lay in ruins, his war machine crippled. But victory came at a cost. As casualty reports filtered in, Karos felt each loss keenly. These were more than numbers on a screen. They were comrades who had fought and died for a cause they believed in. As the fleet regrouped, licking its wounds and assessing the damage, a priority alert flashed across Karos' console. His blood ran cold as he decrypted the message. "Commander," he called out, his voice tight, "we have a problem." Porter hurried over, Chen close behind. They listened in growing horror as Karos relayed the intel. "A cloaked stealth armada," Porter breathed. "Theros's last-ditch effort." Karos nodded grimly. "He's desperate now. He'll throw everything he has left at us." As the implications sank in, Karos's mind raced. They had won a significant victory, but the war was a long way to go. Theros's hidden fleet posed a threat unlike anything they had faced before. Karos straightened, his eyes blazing with grit. "I have an idea," he said, turning to Porter and Chen. "It's dangerous, possibly suicidal. But if it works, we might just have a chance to end this war once and for all." Karos's eyes gleamed with a dangerous light as he outlined his plan. "We infiltrate the stealth command ship while Porter leads a diversionary attack. Once aboard, we'll disable the cloaking technology and expose the entire armada." Chen frowned. "That's insanely risky. How do we even get on board?" "I know their protocols," Karos said, his voice tight. "We'll slip in during the chaos of battle." Porter nodded grimly. "It's our best shot. I'll ready the fleet." Hours later, Karos crouched in a cramped assault shuttle, surrounded by a hand-picked team of human and Elysian rebels. The void outside erupted in a dazzling light show as Porter's forces engaged Theros's loyalists. "Now!" Karos barked. Their shuttle darted through the melee, expertly piloted between streaking energy bolts and debris. They latched onto the stealth command ship's hull with a muffled thunk. Karos led the charge through the airlock, his stolen Elysian rifle at the ready. They encountered resistance immediately, a patrol of guards caught completely off guard by their presence. The corridor filled with plasma fire and shouts of alarm. Karos ducked, feeling the heat of a bolt singe his hair. He returned fire, downing 2 guards in quick succession. "Push forward!" he shouted over the din. They fought their way through twisting corridors, Karos's inside knowledge proving invaluable. Blast doors sealed shut behind them, trapping the ship's crew in sections as they advanced. Finally, they reached the bridge. Karos input an override code, and the doors hissed open. The bridge crew turned, shock evident on their faces. "Stand down!" Karos commanded, his weapon raised. For a tense moment, it seemed they might resist. Then, seeing the drive in the infiltration team's eyes, the officers slowly raised their hands in surrender. Karos strode to the main console, his fingers flying over the controls. "Transmitting the decloaking codes now," he announced. On tactical displays, previously invisible ships suddenly winked into existence. The rebel human fleet, forewarned, pounced on the exposed vessels. A vicious space battle erupted all around them. Karos watched with grim satisfaction as Theros's carefully laid plans crumbled. His moment of triumph was short-lived. A familiar voice rang out behind him. "You always were too clever for your own good, Karos." He spun to see Croxus, the assassin's eyes burning with hatred. Before anyone could react, Croxus was in motion, his blade flashing in the harsh light of the bridge. Karos barely managed to deflect the first strike, the force of it sending him staggering backward. His team moved to intervene, but Croxus was too quick, too skilled. They clashed in a brutal dance, years of shared training evident in every move. Karos felt his strength flagging as Croxus pressed his advantage. A vicious blow sent Karos sprawling. He looked up to see Croxus looming over him, blade poised for a killing strike. "Wait!" Chen's voice cut through the haze of battle. Croxus hesitated, his eyes flicking to Chen. She stepped forward, her hands raised placatingly. "Think about what you're doing," she said, her voice steady despite the tension. "This war, this empire, it's tearing our people apart. There's another way." For a moment, doubt flickered in Croxus's eyes. It was all the opening Karos needed. He surged upward, tackling Croxus to the ground. They grappled fiercely, rolling across the bridge floor. With a final desperate effort, Karos pinned Croxus, his fist raised. "It's over," Karos panted. Croxus glared up at him, defiance etched in every line of his face, but he didn't move. Karos stood, his body aching. "Restrain him," he ordered his team. As they secured Croxus, An urgent transmission crackled over the ship's comm system. Karos's blood ran cold as he deciphered the message. "Theros is overloading his flagship's reactor," he announced, his voice tight with urgency. "He's going to destroy both fleets." Chen's eyes widened in horror. "We have to stop him." Karos nodded grimly, already formulating a plan. "Prepare a boarding party," he ordered. "We're going after Theros." Theros. The flagship's reactor core pulsed with an ominous glow, visible even through the reinforced viewports of Karos's commandeered shuttle. They rocketed towards the massive vessel, dodging debris and stray weapons fire. "We've got one shot at this," Karos said, his fingers flying over the controls. "Chen, I need you on weapons. The rest of you, be ready to board the moment we breach their hull." The shuttle shuddered as they weaved through the chaotic battlefield. A lucky hit from Theros's defenses rocked the small craft, sending sparks cascading from a nearby console. 30 seconds to impact," the pilot called out. Karos gritted his teeth. "Chen, now!" A barrage of concentrated fire erupted from their shuttle, carving a path through the flagship's outer defenses. With a bone-jarring impact, they crashed through the weakened hull and skidded to a halt in a cavernous hangar bay. The team poured out, weapons at the ready. Alarms blared as they fought their way through the ship, Karos leading them unerringly towards the reactor core. They reached the massive chamber just as Theros input the final override codes. The Elysian leader turned, a maniacal gleam in his eyes. "You're too late," he snarled. Karos didn't hesitate. He charged forward, tackling Theros to the ground. They grappled fiercely as Chen and the others worked to disable the overload sequence. With a final, desperate effort, Karos pinned Theros, his fist connecting with a satisfying crunch. The Elysian leader went limp. "It's done," Chen called out. "Reactor stabilized." Karos stood, his body aching, and stared down at the unconscious form of his former leader. "Restrain him," he ordered. "This war is over." The next months passed in a blur of negotiations, rebuilding efforts, and tentative steps towards peace. Karos found himself thrust into a new role. No longer a soldier, but a diplomat bridging the gap between two species. It was during one such meeting that inspiration struck. Karos leaned forward, his eyes bright with possibility. "What if we shared a world?" he asked. "Not just as neighbors, but truly integrated. A place where humans and Elysians could learn from each other, build something new together." The room erupted in a cacophony of voices. Skepticism, interest, outright hostility. But Karos pressed on, outlining his vision for a joint terraforming project. "Arcadia," he said, pulling up a holographic display of a barren, rust-colored world. "Resource-rich, but currently uninhabitable. We could transform it together." It took weeks of debate and planning, but eventually the project was greenlit. Karos assembled a team, the brightest minds from both species, including Chen, whose expertise in xenobiology proved invaluable. They arrived on Arcadia to find a world of harsh winds and toxic dust storms. But beneath that inhospitable surface lay potential. "It won't be easy," Karos said, addressing the assembled scientists and engineers. "We'll face supply shortages, equipment failures, maybe even sabotage from those who oppose this project. But what we're doing here, it's bigger than all of us." The work was grueling. Massive atmospheric processors labored day and night, slowly altering the planet's poisonous air. Karos worked alongside humans and Elysians alike, planting the first seedlings in carefully prepared soil. Months turned to years. Arcadia began to change. The toxic storms gave way to rain clouds. Green began to creep across the landscape. As word of their progress spread, Karos received a message from an old friend. Commander Porter wanted to see Arcadia for himself. Karos stood at the spaceport, watching Porter's shuttle descend through wispy clouds. A warm breeze carried the scent of newly blooming flowers. "Welcome to Arcadia," Karos said as Porter disembarked. "Our new home." Porter's eyes widened as he took in the transformed landscape. "It's incredible," he breathed. As they toured the fledgling colony, Karos felt a deep sense of pride. Humans and Elysians worked side by side, building a future neither species could have imagined alone. But even as hope blossomed on Arcadia, darkness lurked in the shadows. In hidden laboratories, a group of Elysian hardliners toiled in secret, their eyes gleaming with hatred as they perfected a weapon that would shatter the fragile peace. Karos led Porter and Chen to a hilltop overlooking the main settlement. As the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant hues, he allowed himself a moment of optimism. "This is just the beginning," he said softly. None of them noticed the faint mist rising from the earth, carrying with it an invisible threat that would soon plunge their new world into chaos. Chaos! Karos's eyes widened as he recognized the telltale signs of a bioweapon release. He spun to face Porter and Chen, urgency etched on his face. "Everyone, masks on, now!" They scrambled to don protective gear as alarms blared throughout the settlement. Karos's mind raced, piecing together the implications of this attack. It had to be the work of Elysian hardliners, a last-ditch effort to derail the fragile peace. In the days that followed, Karos threw himself into crisis management. The bioweapons' effects were thankfully limited, but the damage to trust between humans and Elysians was severe. He worked tirelessly, coordinating medical teams, reassuring frightened colonists, and hunting for those responsible. As Arcadia recovered, Karos found his influence growing. His swift action and unwavering commitment to unity made him a symbol of hope for both species. He leveraged this newfound authority to push for greater integration efforts across liberated worlds. But peace remained elusive. Reports of sabotage and violence trickled in from fledgling colonies. Karos pored over intelligence briefings, a gnawing dread building in his gut. These weren't isolated incidents. They bore the hallmarks of a coordinated campaign. His fears were confirmed when news of the attack on Avalon reached him. Karos stared at the holographic display, horror mounting as he watched Verlox's forces descend on the defenseless human settlement. The brutal assault left much of the colony in ruins. "They have Porter," Chen said, her voice tight with worry, "and the other survivors." Karos's fist clenched as Verlox's ultimatum came through. The Elysian general's face sneered from the screen, demanding Karos's surrender in exchange for the hostages' lives. "He's bluffing," Karos said, his mind already formulating a plan. "This is about consolidating power, not negotiation." He outlined his strategy to a group of trusted advisors. It was risky, using himself as bait to draw out Verlox's main force. But if they could disable Avalon's captured defenses from within, they'd have a chance to turn the tables. Karos stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching Verlox's armada gather around Avalon. The moment of his supposed surrender approached. He keyed his comm, speaking to the strike teams hidden planetside. "All units, prepare to engage on my mark." Verlox's smug face appeared on the monitor. "So the great unifier bows at last. Come aboard, Karos, and watch as your precious humans—" His words cut off as alarms blared across his fleet. Avalon's defense batteries roared to life, catching the loyalist ships in devastating crossfire. Karos allowed himself a grim smile as he issued the order to attack. The battle raged, Karos's forces pressing their advantage. But victory turned to ash in his mouth as Verlox triggered charges throughout the settlement, targeting the hostage area. "Verlox, stop this madness!" Karos shouted over the comm. "You're killing your own people." The general's only response was maniacal laughter. Karos knew there was only one option left. He strapped himself into a dropship, barking orders to his most elite operatives. "We're going in. Our priority is extracting the hostages." They plunged through Avalon's atmosphere, weaving through waves of enemy fire. Karos's hands flew over the controls, pushing the craft to its limits. They touched down hard amidst the chaos of the shattered colony. Karos led the charge, his team fighting their way through loyalist troops. They reached the hostage area just as another explosion rocked the building. Through the smoke, he saw Chen break free, grappling with Verlox. Time seemed to slow as Verlox seized Chen, using her as a human shield. The general's eyes blazed with hatred as he stared down Karos. "What now, Unifier?" Verlox spat. "Kill me and she dies too. This is what your precious peace has brought us." Karos met Chen's gaze, seeing not fear, but trust. He lowered his weapon. "No more death," Karos said, his voice steady. "This ends now, Verlox. Not with violence, but with choice. Your move." For a long moment, the universe seemed to hold its breath. Then slowly, Verlox's grip on Chen loosened. Around them, loyalist soldiers began to lower their weapons, the fight draining from their eyes. As Karos helped Porter to his feet, he knew this victory was only the beginning. The road ahead would be long, but for the first time in years, he allowed himself to truly hope. Hope. The fragile peace they'd forged held promise, but the scars of war ran deep. Months passed as Karos worked tirelessly to strengthen the Human-Elysian alliance. He oversaw the expansion of joint colonization efforts, his days filled with diplomatic meetings and careful negotiations. Progress was slow but steady. Then came the day that shattered everything. Alarms blared across the Coalition Command Center. Karos rushed to the Situation Room, his heart pounding. The holographic display showed a sea of red, spreading like wildfire across multiple colony worlds. "What are we looking at?" he demanded. A grim-faced analyst stepped forward. "Sir, it appears to be some kind of mutagenic virus, highly aggressive, targeting non-Elysian life forms." Karos's blood ran cold as he absorbed the implications. "A bioweapon?" The analyst nodded. "Preliminary data suggests it's of Elysian origin, ancient but recently reactivated." "By who?" Karos asked, though he already suspected the answer. "A cabal of Elysian scientists, sir. Hardliners opposed to integration." Karos thumped his hand on the console. "Damn it! How did we miss this?" There was no time for recrimination. Reports flooded in of outbreaks consuming entire settlements. Karos sprang into action, coordinating a massive evacuation effort. "Get me a secure line to all colony governors," he ordered. "We need to move fast." Days blurred together as Karos threw himself into the crisis. He personally oversaw refugee transports, refusing to delegate the most dangerous missions. The virus spread relentlessly, always one step ahead of their efforts. Then came the blow that nearly broke him. "Sir?" A junior officer approached, her face ashen. "It's Commander Porter. He's been infected." Karos felt the world tilt beneath his feet. He forced himself to focus, to think. "Get him to the medical bay," he snapped. "Prep a cryo chamber. We're not losing him." He watched as Porter was sealed into stasis, preserved until a cure could be found. Karos placed his hand on the frosted glass, a silent promise to his friend. Chen worked herself to exhaustion alongside the best minds from both species. Karos marveled at her dedication, fueled by her bond with both himself and Porter. Weeks of frantic research finally yielded a breakthrough. Chen burst into Karos's office, her eyes wild with hope and lack of sleep. "We found it," she said breathlessly. "A way to neutralize the virus." Karos leaned forward, hope warring with caution. "How?" Chen outlined the discovery, an immunocatalyst derived from a rare sentient species on the fringes of Elysian space. It was a long shot, but their only chance. "I'll lead the mission myself," Karos declared. The journey to retrieve the catalyst pushed Karos and his team to their limits. They battled hostile alien guardians, the clock ticking relentlessly in their minds. Finally, bruised and bloodied, they secured viable samples. Victory turned to ashes as Chen fell during the extraction, a stray energy blast catching her squarely in the chest. Karos cradled her in his arms as life ebbed from her body. "Promise me," she gasped, her eyes locked on his. "Save them. All of them." Karos nodded, his throat tight with unshed tears. "I swear it, Chen. Your sacrifice won't be in vain." She smiled faintly, then went still. Karos allowed himself one moment of grief before steeling himself for the task ahead. The distribution of the cure became his sole focus. Countless lives hung in the balance as Karos coordinated a massive inoculation effort. Slowly, agonizingly, the tide began to turn. In the aftermath, as the dead were mourned and the survivors began to rebuild, Karos stood before a solemn gathering. Human and Elysian faces blurred together as he spoke of sacrifice, of unity forged in fire. "We honor those who gave everything," he said, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd. "Their names will live on, etched into the very foundation of our shared future." He gestured to a gleaming memorial where Chen's name stood out in bold relief. Let this be a reminder, Kairos continued, of the price paid for peace, and let it galvanize us to ensure such horrors never threaten our people again. As the years passed, Kairos took his place on the newly formed Coalition Council. The work was never ending, but he drew strength from the progress made each day. Humans and Elysians, once bitter enemies, now walked side by side as equals. Then came the day Kairos had both longed for and dreaded. Porter, awakened at last from his long slumber, stood before him. The two men embraced, joy and sorrow mingling between them. "There's so much to tell you," Kairos said softly. He led Porter through the bustling streets of New Avalon, watching his friends wonder at the transformed world around them. As they reached a quiet overlook, Porter turned to him. "Was it worth it?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "All the sacrifice, all the loss." Kairos gazed out at the thriving colony, where humans and Elysians lived and worked as one. He thought of Chen, of all those who had given everything to make this moment possible. "Yes," he said simply, "it was." But even as hope blossomed, shadows gathered on the horizon. New challenges loomed, ready to test the fragile peace they had fought so hard to achieve.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.